Well, good day to everyone joining us and welcome to today's X Talks webinar. Today's talk is entitled The Power of Community Engagement in Clinical Research. My name is Samaya Sheikh and it's my pleasure to be your X Talks host for today. Today's webinar will run for approximately 60 minutes. This presentation includes a Q&A session with our speakers. This webinar is designed to be interactive and webinars work best when you're involved. So please feel free to submit questions and comments for our speakers throughout the presentation using the questions chat box, and we'll attend to your questions during the Q&A session. This chat box is located in the control panel on the right-hand side of your screen. If you require any assistance, you can contact me at any time by sending a message using this chat panel. At this time, all participants are in listen-only mode. Please also note that this event will be recorded and made available for streaming on xtalks.com. At this point, I'd like to thank MVineo Research who developed the content for this presentation. MVineo Research delivers localized trial access to diverse and underserved communities. They empower patients and embrace communities on their terms. Their research solutions cultivate a sustainable local ecosystem that benefits all stakeholders. Removing barriers and unlocking doors to innovation reduces risk and time associated with clinical research while improving ROI. Now it's my pleasure to introduce our speakers for today's event, and our first speaker is Dr. Mark McKenzie. Dr. Mark McKenzie joined MVineo as Chief Medical Officer, where he leads and strategizes new initiatives in the clinical and therapeutic areas. He also provides medical and clinical oversight to MVineo's team of principal investigators involved in trials at community research sites globally. Dr. McKenzie has 2 decades of experience in clinical research, facilitating a range of clinical trials in his career. Our next speaker is Nyambi Blodgett. Nyambi joined MVineo Research through the acquisition of Matrix Clinical Trials, working to engage diverse populations in study opportunities. Prior to MVineo, she strategized clinical trial feasibility at Matrix. Her career and volunteer work, including current efforts with Florida abolitionists to end human trafficking, reflect a commitment to positive impacts. And our final speaker is Caitlin Spingola. Caitlin joined MVineo Research in early 2023, where her site teams deploy a patient-centric and community-driven strategy to engage and recruit participants. Before starting her journey with MVineo, she started her clinical research career as a clinical research associate in 2021. Prior to her journey into clinical research, she had pursued multiple facets in the medical field, ranging from experience as a medical scribe in the ER to a medical assistant and manager of a nonprofit organ donation center. So now, without further ado, I'd like to pass control to our speakers. So whenever you're ready, you can go ahead and get started.
Thank you so much for that introduction. We really appreciate it, and we're happy to have you all here in attendance today. We would like to start by getting into the hot topic of what is community engagement in clinical trials. Nyambi, would you like to take that one on?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you everyone for being here. Community engagement is an open invitation to connect with the community. That includes patients, it's going to be caregivers, businesses, different organizations, medical professionals, as well as local populations in all the spaces that they're most familiar with. We do that in an effort to garner their insight. We want to get them involved in the process of clinical research. And then the goal also being to bring general awareness to these particular groups and to also share as openly as possible, whether it's general awareness with reference to clinical studies or study specific, but make sure that we're sharing why it's important to participate, why it's important for particular populations to participate, what we hope to achieve by conducting clinical research, and then really how you can get involved. One of the key aspects of these conversations is really listening. And so listening to feedback to understand the community that we're engaging, and it helps us improve how we approach people going forward with reference to clinical research, but then it also helps us in developing a collaborative strategy of a variety of different activities to increase participation, which might look a variety of different ways based on the unique aspect of that particular population, geography, or community. For example, we do have a community research site that sits in Arkansas, and we know that Arkansas has more churches per capita than any other state in the United States. And so they have one church for every 405 people. With that understanding, where we engage, the relationships that we're building, and the overall development of the community fabric that we're creating, will lean on church leaders in order to assist us with reaching people where they are. We also take these opportunities and conversations with our local geographies and communities to provide information with reference to the flexibility of our hybrid model. And so with that could be obviously the in-person visits at our community research site, the flexibility we have through home visits, the tele visits that we're able to facilitate, all of that where possible with the protocol where it allows, but transportation services, we speak to those things. And this approach supports transparency. It definitely leans in on the perspective of the people, and it builds a relationship of trust, especially when you're trying to engage populations that have gone underrepresented in clinical research. And so one of the questions we often get is, what's the difference between underserved and underrepresented populations? And I'll just touch on this pretty briefly. So in the underserved, when we're speaking to underserved populations, this is really talking about more so the inadequate access to medical care. There are multiple reasons why this might be the case. It could be literacy challenges, a rural area, so location. There's not a lot of primary care in particular area. And while different groups can fit into these categories, different minority groups or special needs, they can fit into these categories. It's not specifically a call out when we're speaking to underserved populations. A little different from when we're talking to underrepresented populations. We're speaking more so to the reference of a subgroup of individuals whose representation is low when we're considering their general population numbers. And it can rest in categories like race and ethnicity, age, sex, gender, socioeconomic status, access challenges. There are so many which can fit into this category, but that's what we're referencing when we speak to that. As we talk through the variety of barriers that people experience in participating in clinical research, we find that they rest mostly in three categories. And those three categories are knowledge, trust, and ease. So it's definitely a great time, and we're just going to talk through these, but it's a great time to be in research as more people are aware of clinical studies as a result of the pandemic. And they're really showing interest in joining the discussion about its progress. They want to talk about the innovation. So it leaves us with this really great chance to step in and step up. And what I mean by that is there's obviously a lack of knowledge, and that knowledge doesn't just rest with potential participants. It rests with us as well, the responsibility on us to absorb knowledge about the communities in which we're engaging. We learned this when we were working with the Lummi Nation in Bellingham, Washington, and understanding that the tribal council facilitates the rules and kind of make the laws when we're supporting this particular community, which is very different from other areas in which we engaged. We also know that medical professionals lack some information and knowledge with reference to clinical research, what studies are going on, how people can get involved, so many other things that are missing as well. But we also know that they're a very trusted influencer over the decision that people make in order to join or not to join. And so one of the reasons, of which there are many, but one of the reasons that these gaps exist is that we find that clinical trials are conducted, and I was reading MedCity News, 50% of clinical trials are conducted in only 2% of the zip codes in our nation. That leaves a lot of opportunity for engagement in other areas. And so sometimes the confinement of research means that individuals outside of particular areas aren't necessarily getting an opportunity to hear, understand, and learn more about studies. And that often is leaving, research that is largely unvaried in the participants from a background perspective and cultural makeup. And so sharing knowledge that bridges the gap and addresses misconceptions, creating a space that allows us to do that with local populations is a benefit that we're seeing from community engagement. So Dr. McKenzie, I'm really curious as to your thoughts with reference to the trust aspect here.
Yeah, thank you, Nyambi. The medical history or modern medicine history is really just a couple, maybe 300 years old. Part of that, medicine was practiced in cultural settings by passing down therapies from the local environment. Obviously, people have been able to treat things successfully without traditional research, structured clinical trials as we do now. But I would say in the last little while, the last few decades, we've become more diligent about reviewing the ethics and the structure of how we present a clinical trial to an individual who may be interested. We've benefited from a lot of the things that happened previously, whether they were positive or negative, but the current standard does give us a lot more confidence in what that means to approach somebody about a clinical trial, or when we get a request regarding a clinical trial, how that's addressed. As Nyambi mentioned, the pandemic provided a nice window into what clinical research is, got the public talking about it. Many times daily you would see a ticker documenting what was going on with a particular trial and where that was an approval state, who was reviewing it, etc. For some people, that helped their interest. Of course, there was the goal of staying alive and making a difference for the rest of the world. So there was an interest in participation. But generally, prior to that, many people didn't know about clinical trials and also had concerns about being tested on. There are some significant examples in history. The United States, of course, down in Alabama, Tuskegee is a good example of that. In other parts of the world where people in Europe were misused in clinical research, unfortunately, that stain still remains, but the benefit of what we do is still important. And by doing it the right way and communicating that trust it makes a difference in your success of a trial. People who are underrepresented or have very little access, people who are underserved, people who don't have a doctor that they can speak to, or someone who has a lot of experience in the field, are disadvantaged. So when they are approached about a clinical trial, a relationship is very important. Most people have a good relationship with their primary care provider, and for that reason, they're the ones they would want to have them speak to about the clinical trial. From our standpoint, because of the missteps per history and where we are today, we make a big effort to develop relationships in the communities and provide the appropriate knowledge, as was spoken about, and make sure that relationship gives the potential subject or potential patient a chance to be educated and develop a trust with us prior to enrollment. Caitlin, how easy is it to participate in a trial?
Super easy, actually. Thank you. That's a really great segue to talk about ease. Our model for our organization, we take a bunch of different factors into play when we're deciding where we're going to house our mobile research units. So we take into consideration the US Census, socially determined, trial hub. We take in all these different factors and information to determine where a good area is going to be that we will reach these populations, the underserved, the underrepresented. And from that as well, once we identify these communities, we're providing that ease. We are building the knowledge of the local community for research trials in their area. We're building the trust by having our local clinicians that are local to the area, but also they are the ones that are out helping recruit potential participants, building that trust and knowledge and educating them so that, it's different from your typical setup, because not only are they the ones that are out in the community, but they're the ones that are actually seeing you on site too, conducting your visit and really justifying and solidifying that trust aspect of it. Our locations that we choose, or where we choose to put our locations, are also typically in a high traffic area, and it's easy for visibility. It's easy for them to have access to with local transportation or other means that we end up using. And as you can see on the slide, this is an example of our Illinois location. It's right in the center of the Illinois Medical District. It's a very high traffic area, whether on foot or via car or public transportation as well. And so I think it's important to highlight, as it is, we are trying to provide that ease of access into the opportunity for participants to have an access or opportunity to join a clinical trial. We're also trying to build the knowledge and the trust of the local communities too, and that's really important. Dr. McKenzie, I would love to hear your thoughts on how our approach is different for specific studies, or how we choose our studies.
Well, it is a defined strategy, and on the screen you can see some important aspects of it. We get to know the community. We evaluate what the social and health risk status is of the community. There are a lot of medical conditions that are pretty much standard across the United States and in other countries that you will see us considering. But there are also some things that fit better with a particular population, and it's important to provide clinical research as a healthcare option for them. Will the trial be beneficial to the community? And then will the community be beneficial to the sponsor in an ethical way when we evaluate that? Those are aspects of how we choose our strategy. We don't accept every trial. Not every trial is going to be appropriate for the communities in which we serve. And that's a major piece of considering what we want to do and how we can affect the trial in a positive way. There's also ongoing assessment that we do of the community. How has our relationship, our interaction from an education standpoint, from a community event standpoint, the people we've networked with, the questions that we've answered, and then just the conduct of a clinical trial, how has that affected the community? These are things that we keep track of for future reference and to allow us to adjust midstream as well. I think the benefits of something like this can be long lasting, and it's important to see what comes of it as we go forward. Nyambi, the next question is to you. Tell us some more about selecting communities.
Yeah, I think it's super important to garner all the information up front. So do our own research with reference to these locations that we decide and choose to engage. We're looking at it by selecting just a little bit more specifics around it. Who are we engaging from a demographics perspective? So we do pull that information and data. We're looking at languages, like what language is most commonly spoken in the home, what's the second next language, so we have an opportunity to facilitate the components of our recruitment strategy that specifically is customized for the geographic location and community that we're engaging. We look at things like understanding access to technology, like prominent age in the area. What are the needs of the local community? So for example, before I get to the slide, socially determined, you heard Caitlin mention that. will allow us to identify social determinants of health. And so if we see a particular area has food resource risk, we know in the ways that we engage, which we've done in the past, is having our team assist with preparing meals for the local community, and working with Meals on Wheels to do that. So we have opportunities as we understand the local area to really engage in a way that allows us to communicate clinical research, but also give back to the local community as well. We do look at prevalence. Obviously, with our mobile setup, our community research sites, there's logistical needs. We evaluate the different pieces of the area in order to make sure security solutions are in place. We have an opportunity to use our partner Research Grid's inclusive platform as well, and it assists us with developing and getting a visual on the different organizations that we can partner with in order to assist with broadening our mission and our message. So those are just a few things, but we also have a very flexible, what I like to call toolbox of recruitment strategies and tactics. As you can see here on the screen, really speaking to, I won't go through every single bullet point here, but you can see that it's varied in the different avenues that we use from the community network and outreach perspective. You'll see some examples of the different ways in which we engage with the community, from different events and expos, partnering up with the local governments where we're able to, religious organizations, different community centers, you name it, we have gone there. And then promotional, so this is going to be your central recruitment tactics, you know, the ones we're most familiar with, your social media, digital, traditional efforts with reference to newspaper, radio, those pieces. We're using our database, same as anybody else, and then different medical avenues for connecting medical professionals or businesses to connect participants to us in the sense of testing centers, or leaning on our HCP opportunities. And then we also have a category that's kind of set aside for anything that might be unique. So if it's a rare and orphan disease, making sure we have partners that we can align with who are specialists in those areas, SMEs in those areas to assist. And then we collaborate our recruitment efforts and strategies with our CRO or sponsor for a particular study. This helps us reach people where they are. It gives us the flexibility, since everybody's not the same, to pull different levers based on the areas in which we're engaging. And so I think it's important to say that. We are also facilitating free health screenings, another way we're able to give back to the local community. And I'll let Caitlin speak a little bit more to that.
This is a really awesome opportunity that our organization has provided to anyone who is potentially interested. Each of our community research sites have the opportunity for any participant that comes, whether it's through an inquiry online or they come and quite literally knock on the door. The participant will fill out a general basic demographic form so we can get their information to contact them if they're interested in a future clinical trial that we have going on. But also they have the opportunity to get a basic workup. So they have the potential to get labs drawn. So they could get an A1C, a CBC, and a CMP, and they can get those results free of charge. So it is of no charge to the participant. Along with labs as well, they have the opportunity to get a basic eye exam and a basic memory exam too. Something that, you know, most people, especially in the underserved and underrepresented communities, do not have access to, or it costs them an arm and a leg because they have a high deductible or their insurance doesn't cover testing as often as they need it. So that is a really unique opportunity that I'm very thankful our organization has the opportunity to provide to participants and to really stand behind what our organization stands behind.
I think too, some of these opportunities or activities that we facilitate with reference to lunch and learns, for example, for different medical professionals, or even just community partners, businesses, to help them understand what we do as a business and where our heart lies and passion to engage more people even in spaces that might be unique to our industry. We use, as I mentioned, HCP connection opportunities, local events, and we have partners across the nation who support us in these different activities. You heard Caitlin mention we are in the IMD, so in the Illinois Medical District. We've had an amazing opportunity to facilitate partnerships in that area. Had a tour and swag event where we allowed some professionals in the public health space to come onto the community research site and just take a look around. We do this pretty often with the public as well to get them accustomed to and familiar with our facility, but offering an opportunity for local professionals to come in and take a look at what it is we offer. We are also partnered up with an organization called Fusion Fest, and this is in the Orlando, Florida area. And it's an organization mostly centered around supporting creatives. And so fashion shows, different food of cultures. It's a diversity education program, really. And what we've been able to do is partner with them in such a way that we're able to communicate our opportunities from a health perspective aspect to broaden our reach to people who maybe we wouldn't have a chance to engage through Fusion Fest. They have a variety of different events and talk shows, and so we're able to collaborate in that way. Georgia Tech is one of my favorites, and so we did have a chance, for example, to partner with Georgia Tech, the School of Industrial Design and Architecture, and we had a chance to really get in on the ground level of students who were clinical trials naive to help create a semester program that allowed us to speak into how important it is that the facility makes in engaging people from diverse backgrounds. And so that semester ran from January this year clear through March, and it was a great opportunity to get more involvement in clinical research than in a way that was unique and different to other facets we've used in the past.
I think something else we should probably talk about is how we see community engagement replacing traditional recruitment, or how we see it transitioning.
Yeah, that's a great question, Caitlin. I don't see it replacing traditional methods. Community engagement is tricky because there are obviously some short-term opportunities and partnerships and wins that you can make, but it's relationship building, so it is a long game in establishing those that trust and relationship. And so I don't see it fully taking over like central recruitment efforts from a digital aspect, which is able to produce a large amount of volume when you're facilitating recruitment. But I do see it as producing quality participants who've developed a relationship with our company and developed a relationship with our team in such a way that they're invested to continue to join the study and then continue throughout the length of the study. Dr. McKenzie, what's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I don't see it replacing traditional methods at all. If anything, it can enhance aspects of traditional participation in research. But as you said, that relationship is key many times for somebody to actually complete the trial without any significant changes. Having our boots on the ground, knowledge of ourselves and knowledge of the community, it enhances recruiting. We'll always do the other pieces too, I think, in this business until something different comes along. But this is additive and very supportive of our efforts.
Yeah.
I think we should talk too about what types of studies we're focusing on or we try to select. I know you already talked about that a little bit, Dr. McKenzie, but would you like to highlight anything else about it?
Let me address that a little more. We do pretty much the same type of clinical trials that other traditional sites do. Invenio is a hybrid company. We have aspects of our research that are brick and mortar. We have a lot of mobile research units which function as a fully sanctioned site. In fact, for those of you in the business, you understand from the FDA standpoint, the site is documented on the 1572 appropriately and stays in that location. We talked about strategy and how we do that. We also have a portion of our business that involves just the home health piece, where we have clinicians that attend subjects at their house to determine whether it's sample collection, physical evaluation, but aspects of a clinical trial. That allows us to flex into whatever part of the protocol is important for completion. It removes some of the barriers that are traditional. And I know that others in the business do pieces of this, but that's one of the benefits of being a hybrid company as we are. So the therapeutic areas essentially cover the same things that you would see in most of the locations in our country. The chronic metabolic diseases, granted, for quite some time, COVID overwhelmed many of us in clinical research, and that was the primary, whether it was a testing, a treatment, or many of the vaccines. But there's a lot more research that goes on every day in this country, and we're able to participate in all, if not pieces of that. Traditional research sites do require outside vendors or imaging centers or the procedures that they may not have physically in their units. It's the same for us. Our units can handle a certain amount of activities and other things we have to partner with local clinicians to complete.
Do either of you guys think we are benefiting from our approach, or what are our benefits?
Yeah.
For the sponsor, I'm sorry. For the sponsor, it is key, especially considering what was highlighted by both of you earlier. Our ability to access demographics that are not fully represented or appropriately represented in research is an important piece of what we do. And Nyambi, I'll let you talk more about this piece.
Yeah, I think, I absolutely agree. There is a benefit. And I think it starts first with intentionality. That's what we've created through our outreach and opportunities that we have to engage local people and our local communities. We see that, looking at the slide here, you can see the total minority ethnicity, but so from practical benefits that we're seeing in terms of these efforts are really sitting at 44, I'm going to say 45% diversity there. And in some cases with our studies, we're seeing 60% depending on the location and the protocol, both of which obviously sit higher than our industry average. And so because of these different avenues and the approach that we're taking to engage people in locations that often go underrepresented or even uninvited to engage, is demonstrating this opportunity, which is a benefit for all of us, to be honest, as well as our, sponsors and clients as well. So it's a real benefit that we're able. This is the win part. This is the win part of the discussion.
I think too, to add on to that as well, for as far as like patient retention goes, with our model, with our clinicians being so heavily involved in, like how we all spoke about knowledge, trust, and ease, it really helps secure, when you have a study, you have follow-up phone calls, you have end of study visits, you have e-diaries are completing, you have appointment reminders. We have all these different things in place, but I think a really big success to patient retention really revolves around that relationship the participant has built with the site team, because sometimes you'll have some participants who get a little excited to go to the site because they get to find out the latest gossip or tea, or they might enjoy sitting there eating a coffee and having a coffee and eating a cookie with it as they sit there and socialize with other participants that are waiting to do their study visit too. So I think that's also a unique aspect as well that we were able to kind of touch on too and highlight. And I think, Dr. McKenzie, you already addressed how we benefit from the sponsor and CRO, or how the sponsor and CRO benefit from our approach, but I think it's time to open up to the rest of the participants to see if they have any questions, unless there's anything else you guys would like to add.
Yeah, no, we can take some questions at this time.
Well, thank you very much for that insightful presentation. And that does bring us to a Q&A portion of this webinar. So attendees, if you do have more questions, keep sending them in. We've already received some questions, so let's start off with those. And our first question here is for you, Caitlin. So it's, what areas do you serve currently and which ones are chosen for the future?
Oh, I love this question. We are forever growing, so please do keep that in mind. I will list off the immediate ones that come off the top of my head, but we have locations in on the East Coast, West Coast, centrally, in the UK, so we are not limited in where we are going to reach. But currently, I will not be able to list off the places in the UK, so I do apologize. But I can tell you in the US, we have Alabama, Florida, Georgia, Illinois. Centrally, we have Texas, Arkansas, Oklahoma, and on the West Coast, we have Arizona and California. And like I said, we still have a few more that are in the works that we will be announcing when it's time. And as far as picking our next locations, that, again, there's a lot of factors that come into picking the locations based off of, like we talked about, socially determined, the US Census, trial hub. There's a lot of factors that come into play that really direct the next site location that we end up choosing. And I don't know, Niambi and Dr. McKenzie, if there's anything you guys want to add to that.
I think that's a good summary of what we're doing now and where we go next. We've described through this how we target locations, both from a need standpoint and access. And I think as you see us grow, that will be easy to tell why we did what we did.
Yeah, I would just add that through that list that you provided, Caitlin, as you think through those areas where, California or Arkansas, Little Rock, Arkansas, or Birmingham, Alabama, the differences that you can think of with reference to those particular areas and what that might look like from an engagement perspective is one of the reasons we have chosen areas that are so unique in that aspect, is that we're able to really customize our approach specific to the needs of those areas, of which there's always many. So just the vast differences between them is key to point out. Yep, thank you. It's a good question.
Great question.
Thank you. Thank you for those answers. And we have another great question from an audience member. And this could be for you, Dr. McKenzie, or you, Caitlin. But the question is, sometimes overlooked, mobile phlebotomists are members of the communities they live in. Is there a need for this service to lessen patient burden?
Go ahead, Caitlin. I'll let you start.
I'm going
yes, but go ahead.
Yeah, I'm gonna say there's always a need. I mean, I think as we are growing within the medical field, within clinical research, we are forever finding out different ways to, again, ease access, make medical appointments, make clinical research trials. We want to make sure that we are making it all accessible and easing that burden for the participants. So however we can do that, whether it's getting a mobile phlebotomist that's local to the area, a local nurse, a local advanced practitioner, a community engagement specialist, you name it, that is definitely on our forefront. And I'm sure it will continue to forever grow as we are venturing on.
Yeah, we've had sponsors who have partnered with us where that is the key piece of the trial that we're doing, and it requires a mobile phlebotomist. But we also consider, when we're presented with a potential trial, that as part of the strategy in getting things done. Again, we talk about removing barriers to participation in clinical research, and this is one of the key aspects. If it's easier for us to go to the subject or the patient rather than them coming to us, we will figure out a way that makes sense for the trial.
Mm-hmm.
Great, thank you again for that answer. And we have another question from an audience member. And Niambi, this question could be for you. So that question is, how do you establish collaborations with medical centers, colleges for their clinical trials?
Yeah, that's a really great question. There are so many pieces that involves, but so first we typically will make ourselves known by a variety of different ways. We use every avenue available to us. So if it's a email communication or a telephone call, we prefer to go in person to have an opportunity to speak to the best person, which is also one of the challenges in identifying who that best person is sometimes to speak to in order to facilitate that. If we are at a college, for example, we might lean on the wellness center. We've had opportunities to build relationships through wellness centers on local universities. We lean on other partners that we have established to see who they might suggest. But typically we're outreaching for an opportunity to get in front, to have a call, something similar to this, where we can share where our heart and passion lies. For the most part, we find that people are agreeable to this approach with the local community. And so it's a great opportunity for us to share who we are and what we do. It is somewhat still unique, and so we need to make sure that we're able to share what our hybrid model is and how we do that from a logistical standpoint. Often we use universities or different businesses as our hosting sites. So as we think through where we're actually placing our community research site, there's a process to that, and we're able to partner with different organizations. We're at, for example, those lists that Caitlin provided, churches, community centers. We've been at different medical facilities. We've been in the past at some nationally known locations. And so trying to make sure that there's a variety of different ways in which we can engage is also another thing. I'll say that we often start small with a small commitment and relationship. Maybe it's just communicating who we are, what we do, and being able to leave some materials at a particular location or business. And then we continue to engage with that partner in order to expand on how we might partner and engage in the future. And so that could look like us joining events together, which we've done in the past, hosting events in some fashion or another. As I mentioned with Fusion Fest, maybe hopping on for a interview or talk show. We attend different events that they host. It's varied, but we use all channels to do that. And we pull out all stops from different departments that might need to hop in and assist us in engaging with that relationship as well.
And sometimes you might be even lucky enough to get Dr. McKenzie who shows up.
Yeah, I do my best to visit where I can. I think we all showing our face in the community is part of the relationship, getting to know others and making it making ourselves available to them for questions, for comments. We learn a lot from those communications, and it's very important to have face-to-face meetings as much as possible.
I think Dr. McKenzie's assistant ever so prevalent when it comes to the medical community as well as our clinicians. And so those lunch and learns that we're facilitating with local HCPs, if there's questions or anything along those lines, making sure we have an avenue to assist with responses where necessary. But it's a really great question too.
Thank you, Nyambi. And we have another question for you, Caitlin. That question is, are you currently looking for additional staff in current locations? How would someone join your team to contribute to such a great initiative?
Oh my goodness, I love that question. If you haven't been to our website yet, please take a gander. Our team has spent a lot of time making it user-friendly, but also visually appealing. They've done an amazing job, so please take a look at our careers page. Like I said, we do have some sites that we haven't announced yet that will be coming eventually, so there may be a site location in your area that you may want to participate in. But yeah, take a look on our careers page, see if there's any positions that you are interested in. There are some that we are hiring for. As we continue to grow and expand, there will be plenty more, I'm sure of it. If you have any questions specifically about any of our positions, you're welcome to reach out to me via LinkedIn. You can email me, however I can help with answering that or giving you any guidance about what that position is as well. We have a rock star of an HR team too, who would be more than happy to take any questions as well.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Caitlin. And we have another question. And it's a question for you, Dr. McKenzie. And it's, have you seen an increase in trial enrollment since you have begun the Community Health Screenings Initiative?
Yeah, the data on that is short because remember, every trial has a particular amount of subjects that they're after. Not every trial is competitive. And then you also have to be careful that the subject fits the inclusion-exclusion criteria. So while the Health Screening Initiative does give everyone who participates something, they're giving health information and get some examinations done, and that's beneficial to them. They may not yet fit for a clinical trial. We will see that as time goes by. They will be part of the people we reach out to when something comes up, and they can express interest that way. Caitlin, I'll let you comment as well, but I would say at this point, we don't have the data to show that that alone increases enrollment. It does help with engagement, and long term, that could help with better enrollment or the most appropriate type of individual for participation.
Correct. And I think also too, I don't think I mentioned, this is a fairly new initiative. It's been ongoing now maybe a full month. So it is rather new to the organization as our initiative, but I'm very eager and optimistic that come 6 months from now, we'll be able to see some really interesting numbers.
Thank you. Thank you for that answer. And we have a question for you, Niambi, and for you as well, Dr. McKenzie. So the question is, would you work more with the institution as a whole in establishing a clinical trial outreach program, mobile access, or with the PI?
That's a great question. Dr. McKenzie, do you want to tackle that one? Yeah.
So every trial, as we know in this business, is contracted with a PI. That's who's documented. The organization who supports the trial is also part of that agreement. We work with both. We want to have principal investigators who have unique experience as well as interest, and also because one of the key parts of our business is that community engagement, the relationship, we want a PI or sub-investigator for that matter who is part of the community or has access to the community or has some attachment to the community. That's an important piece. But we'll work with both institutions to support a trial, to develop a strategy. We'll also work with a particular PI. We have a team of principal investigators who are full-time, and we also have a team who work on a part-time or contract basis based on what the need is for a particular location.
Thank you, Dr. McKenzie. And another great question from an audience member. That question is, are you placing your clinical trial in locations where patients are getting their care?
Good question. That also is a little bit of both. There are locations where the medical care access is good, where we may have a clinical trial site nearby. We're not actually placing it in the individual doctor's offices on a general basis, but we have done situations like that. We have done that for a particular trial as well. But we consider where we would make it easy or easier for the subject to participate in a trial or an individual patient to get there. That's a little bit different than saying we're going to put it in a physician's office. And maybe another way of looking at it is we're matching, as we said earlier, matching the trial to the community and the community to the trial. So that could entail being near a clinician's office, partner with that clinician in particular, or just in the community where they can have easy access to us.
Yeah. Can I piggyback off of that, Dr. McKenzie, and just add that one of the things I think we spoke about this earlier, a benefit to, the sponsor with reference to some of these approaches is that we often do have, so those sites that Caitlin shared are often situated in areas that doesn't have a lot of research conducted in this facility. It's not true across the board for all of them, but it is for some of them. So it does also provide an extra reach for our, clients and sponsor for areas to engage that typically don't have a lot of competition in that particular area, and does have opportunity. So just wanted to share that piece too.
Thank you. Thank you for the comprehensive answer. And Caitlin, we have another question for you, and it's a great question from an audience member. The question is, what is patient reception to your solution? Some similar organizations are having mixed reviews.
So this is a great question. Our participants and the patients have the same experience that you would have at any other organization whenever it comes to going through and completing their visits. They come on site for their visit, they are seeing the clinician, they're seeing the team members, they're having their assessments done, and then if there's e-diaries or phone calls that they're doing afterwards, it's exactly the same. The difference is just that we technically have wheels on our unit. But again, it's the same idea, the same perception. Participants, we've gotten some really good feedback from them of having a great experience with the clinicians on site. Again, that ease, knowing that ease aspect of it, being able to make it easy for them to get to the trial that they're participating in, but also the fact that these are local community clinicians that they're working with. So they've already built that trust and they have that knowledge and they have that rapport with the on-site team as well. And I'm not sure, Niambi, if you have anything else you want to add from the recruitment kind of side of things too.
Yeah. I would just add that, our community research site isn't common. Like it's not like a common thing that you see very often. People aren't as familiar with why it's where it is or what it does. And so we often invite people, just anybody, to join us in taking a look at what it is. And we speak about, the interior makeup of the, the community research site, that we have a varied amount of varied variations of our mobile community site, so different sizes to assist us with getting into particular nooks and crannies around the community. So as people see these things, they'll often call and ask or stop by, like Caitlin said, and just want to take a look. They're curious and knock on the door. We'll invite them in, and then we have these events that will allow people to really come inside and take a look. And it's not just the public; these are professionals as well, medical professionals, to come in and really kind of engage with us that way. I think from some of the feedback we've received from the, health screening initiative is that there's this level of intimacy as a result of our facility setup that feels really personal to those that are engaging with our team, which I think is a benefit. So that's all I would add, Caitlin.
Thank you for that answer. And we have another question from an audience member, and that question is, does the company specialize in a particular phase of trials?
We will participate in all phases of clinical trials. For the traditional phase 1 trial, you're needing to house somebody, although there are some phase 1 trials which don't require overnight confinement. Clearly, those would be difficult for our solution. However, other phases of clinical trials from 1 through 4, we can do just as a traditional brick and mortar site would do. We don't have a restriction on that, but there are limitations for us as well as other sites where we would choose not to do a trial if it doesn't fit what we're after. But you can consider us for any phase of a clinical trial.
Well, that's all the time we had today for all those questions, and thank you so much for all those answers as well. We've reached the end of the Q&A portion of this webinar, but attendees, if you have more questions, not to worry, you can quickly jot this down again. So go ahead, if you have more questions, more comments, you can send those to the MVineo team as well. Thank you everyone for participating in today's webinar. You will be receiving a follow-up email from Xtalks with access to the recorded archive for this event. A survey window will be popping up on your screen. Your participation is appreciated as it will help us improve our webinars. Additionally, there's a link to view the recording of this event, which you can also share with your colleagues. So they may register for the recording here as well. So I encourage you to take that down. It will also be emailed to you in 1 to 3 business days. Now, please join us in giving a big thank you to our speakers. That's Dr. Mark McKenzie, Niambi Blodgett, Caitlin Spingola for that fantastic presentation. We hope you found this webinar informative. Have a great day, everyone.
Thank you, guys.